Awesome. Um, my name is Claire Denson, and on behalf of Atmosphere Press, I am pleased to welcome you to today's live author reading, New Fiction with Mystery Elements. Today, we'll be hearing from Andrea Beck, author of Below the Surface, released October 14th, Deborah Jennings, author of Ghost Child, Uncovering Family Secrets from a Back Porch to the Yucatan, also released October 14th, and Eric Eichhorn, author of OGALLALA, released November 18th. All three authors' books can be purchased from online retailers and select bookstores. And of course, the books can be ordered on Amazon, on Atmosphere Press's website at atmospherepress.com/books. Please see the links in the chats, which I'm posting now. Let's see. Awesome. Um, at the end of this event, we will have time for your questions. So during the readings, if you have a question for our authors, please go ahead and type it in the chat, and I'll make sure that it gets asked. Please stay muted for the duration of the event, but feel free to use the chat for praise and comments. And one last note, we at Atmosphere Press appreciate your support today and always. If you have a manuscript of your own, we'd love to read it. Submit your work today to books@atmospherepress.com. Again, thank you so much for tuning in and supporting Andrea, Deborah, and Eric today. Let's start with our first reader, Andrea Beck. Andrea is a writer and high school English teacher from Vancouver, Canada. Her flexible career has allowed her to work in America and Europe for the last 20 years, where she also became a school counselor. Recently residing in the Netherlands, Andrea has completed her first young adult novel, Below the Surface, which was inspired by a real event. She is currently working on a women's novel, a menopausal memoir delving into the renewal of her forgotten courage. Her greatest accomplishments include raising two magnificent daughters and a border collie, learning enough German to marry a Swiss man, completing an Ironman, and swimming in over 25 countries to date. In Below the Surface, the new girl at Oak Park High, Emily, quickly learns that small towns come with big judgments. When a student mysteriously vanishes, suddenly whispers turn into accusations, and Emily finds herself at the center of it all. Let's welcome Andrea.
Thank you, Claire. And thanks everyone out there who's listening. A big hello from the Netherlands. As Claire mentioned, the story is loosely based on a real event that occurred when I lived in the Midwest 15 years ago. And the event stuck with me all these years, sort of simmering in my brain. So I'm glad to finally hold the final finished product in my hand now. Um, the narrator is a 16-year-old girl named Emily who moves to the small town called Oak Park. And a few weeks later, another boy arrives in the small town named Oliver or Ollie, and they become close friends. Two other key characters in the story are their classmate and the golden couple of the small town, Matt and Lexi. Okay, let me begin on page 1. It is a flash forward, so it's a sort of a suspenseful hint of what is going to develop in the story over the next 6 months. A sharp knocking on the front door startled me out of a restless sleep. I sat upright, my body instantly on high alert, ready to defend. Until last week, I didn't even know that I possessed this survival instinct, but now that it had been triggered, I felt constantly on edge. The knocking got louder, more insistent. I heard my parents mumbling, and then Dad's heavy footsteps start down the stairs. Duke let out a couple of barks and then followed Dad. My clock read 12:37. No one good knocks at your door at this time of night. I quietly opened my bedroom door. Someone had switched on the hall light, and I could see Mum was standing in our tiny hallway, fumbling to put on her teal housecoat, an anxious expression on her face. She whispered to me, holding out a hand in a stop-like motion, "Emily, stay there. Dad will see who it is." From her position, she had a view down the staircase and directly at the front door. I watched her face, her intent hazel eyes focused on the door to see if she would recognize the aggravated knocker. Her jawline was tense. As we heard Dad unbolt the lock, the pounding on the door ceased. I didn't hear him call out for the person to identify themselves, which was either bold or stupid of him after what had happened recently. But I imagine he had caught a glimpse of someone through the peephole, and he opened the door. "Where's my son?" screamed a woman. "Where is he?" Mom physically flinched at the accusation. I inched forward to take a peek and caught sight of a very distraught Mrs. Graft. "Your daughter must know something," Mr. Graff demanded, forcing his way around his wife toward Dad. Duke let out another bark as Mum let out a slight gasp. My heart was racing and my sleepy eyes grew wider. "Just calm down, both of you," Dad said. "I know you are scared and hurting, but Emily has nothing to do with your son's disappearance." Mr. Graff shoved Dad aside, and as Dad began to fall, I felt my heart lurch up in my chest. I moved to go down the stairs, but Mom yanked me back, pushing me into my dark bedroom. She shut the door and braced her back against it. "Emily," she whispered forcefully, "we need to call the police." I wish I could blame my parents. After all, it was their upending decision to move our small family to this small town. Their decision was never intended to be harmful. In fact, my parents believed wholeheartedly that it was the right choice. They simply had no magic crystal ball to give them any warning of the devastating events ahead. Moving was a gamble, but if I'm being honest, I was glad at the time that my parents did what they did. While I liked to be on my own, I had to admit that I was lonely in my previous overcrowded town. I wanted a new start, a new friend or two, as well as some fresh inspiration from my art and creative energy. I thought it'd be easier to blame the nightmare that ensued on a parental mistake, as all parents make mistakes, usually out of love for their child. But it wasn't their fault. All of us made mistakes. Okay, and then 70 pages later, Emily is starting to fall for Ollie, who turns out to be an exceptional football quarterback. And when Ollie inadvertently takes Matt's long-standing quarterback position, it disrupts Matt and his tight friendship group. And Tony, who'd always been a part of Matt's group, decides to change loyalties and he sides with Emily and Ollie. So that's what's happening here. That night, my phone call to Ollie centered on Tony. Apparently, in practice, Matt and Connor had been rough on Tony, but he'd held his own. He was a tank. Tony had even chatted a little with Ollie. He told me about his father's Italian deli in the city. He's really proud of it. Matt teases Tony about it, but I think he just aligned himself with Matt so he wouldn't get bullied. Tony actually has a real soft side to him, Ollie surmised. Wow, I guess you never really know about someone. Yeah, sometimes people surprise you. Well, I'm not sure the likes of Matt and Lexi would ever surprise me. It's almost in their blood to act superior, I added. Right away, I was embarrassed by my harsh judgment. Was I holding on to lingering resentment from their threats to Ollie? I tried to lighten the mood. Everyone seems to be coming to the game Friday. My parents are so excited, so be prepared for their loud screams. Your parents going? I think so. Never sure if my dad's home from work in time, though. Adam was going to come too, but his car broke down again. Ollie had told me a great deal about his best friend in his old town. While one of their main hobbies growing up had been building Lego sets, Adam had moved on to tinkering with car engines. As soon as possible, Adam got his driver's license and bought an old Chevy, which, apparently, he spent more time repairing than driving. Darn, I wanted to meet him. I wonder when you'll know who's starting as quarterback. I guess we'll find out soon how strong an influence Matt, his family, and even this whole town have on the coach's decision. Yeah, you don't have to warn me about that. It's hard to be an outsider in a small town, Ollie admitted tiredly. I know. I wonder if we're ever going to feel like we really belong here or want to. Ollie was quiet, contemplating. Then it was his turn to change the mood with a brighter topic. Hey, did you get your application finished for the painting contest? Yep, Miss Mooney helped, and she's even sending it in for me. Now I just have to get the final details done by the end of next week, I explained, nibbling on a hangnail as I thought about the work ahead. You'll get it done. It looks amazing already. I smiled as I remembered Ollie's reaction when he'd recently popped by the art room and seen the nearly finished project. He had looked so genuinely impressed, it had sent a thrilling tingle through my whole body. We talked more about Miss Mooney and my admiration of her before moving on to analyzing our favorite TV show, Modern Family, and what Phil and Luke Dunphy were up to in the latest episode. Finally, we sleepily said goodnight. I fell asleep with that silly grin on my face once again. Okay. And then a few pages later, there's another 6-month flash forward in the form of an email. And it reads, every parent at Oak Park High received the same email that Tuesday. It read, Dear Oak Park parents and students, a valued student of our community has been missing now for 4 days. Teachers and counselors are at hand to help any students who are suffering from this unsettling news. Until further notice, all after-school activities are being suspended. If you have any information that could assist the police in this search, please reach out to the department as soon as possible. Time is of the essence. We will keep you updated on any developments. If you have any questions or concerns, please call the school's number listed below. Sincerely, Jay Staver, Oak Park High Principal. And then my last excerpt is on page 96, and Emily and Ollie seem to be thriving in Oak Park, while Matt and Lexi are falling apart. Winter in the Midwest can drag on. January and February saw record cold temperatures and snow accumulation. Only by the end of February did the snow start to thaw, when the sun finally brought some warmth with its appearance again. Dad was back out in the garden, uncovering our sapling, letting it bask in the light rays. A new energy started to emerge, an early spring fever. In March, Lexi made the grand announcement that she was going to throw a party at the end of the month, a spring fling. She was no longer seeing the college boy, and it seemed like Matt, who had momentarily dated some of Lexi's friends, was trying hard to get back together with her. She appeared to be relenting. Meanwhile, Ollie and I were falling deeper in love each day. We spent every chance we could together. We believed nothing could touch us, nothing could alter the course of our budding love. These cold months were, on the surface, a calm time. What I didn't realize then, though, was that past resentments and bitter feelings had only been hibernating over the winter. Now these simmering emotions were ready to wake up again. And that's right near the end of part one, before getting into part two, which is called The Storm. And I really can't reveal any more. You'll have to read to see who goes missing and just how everyone's going to react to this crisis. So I hope you enjoy it.
Amazing, Andrea. You have such a present reading voice. It really keeps us in the story.
Oh,
Thank you so much for that. Um, Next reading is Deborah Jennings. Deborah is an environmental lawyer, retired from a global law firm. She was a partner for 34 years. The author is the mother of adopted twins and herself an adoptee who didn't learn she was adopted until she was 32 years old. She wrote this memoir about the discovery of her adoption and the ensuing international search for her origins. She grew up in very modest circumstances, but discovered an illustrious biological family, including a grandfather who was a political figure, and a John Kennedy appointee, and a grandmother who was from the Yucatan and graduated from Cambridge University. She's a former board member of Adoptions Together, now named Path for Families in Washington, D.C. Ghost Child is a sweeping story of identity, belonging, and the strange, poignant bond between a daughter and the unforgettable birth mother she did not know. Deborah, take it away.
Thank you, Claire. My story occurs more than 30 years ago. And when I was practicing law, there's no way I could write a book. But finally, upon retirement, I was able to do so. So here's my story. As she mentioned, I was adopted, but I didn't know that. And don't put it up yet. I'll tell you when, okay? I didn't know I was adopted. And thank you. I grew up in very modest circumstances in Bethesda, Maryland, as the only child of Jess and Eileen Jennings. Bethesda is a very affluent area in the Washington, D.C. area, but I grew up in very modest circumstances on the back porch of a one-bedroom apartment. My mother went through 8th grade. My father went through 11th. They were wonderful, loving parents, but from an early age, I had a sense that something wasn't quite right. I didn't belong. But they went to great lengths to make me believe that I was their biological child, including visits to the hospital where I was born, all the details of my birth, and so on. So I never had the courage to confront them. So at age 32, I decided it was time, and I called up my aunt, who confirmed the adoption. So I set off in a search, and as you may know, at the time and now also, almost all states seal adoption records. So there is no direct path to find out the facts about your birth. But the department in Virginia, where I was adopted, was willing to share a report. So I went down to see the report, and unfortunately, it was 20 pages that someone had gone through with a razor blade, cutting holes throughout the papers, so they were like Swiss cheese. And the object was to remove any identifying information, not just names, but any identifying information. So there were three important things I learned, though. One was the date of birth of my mother, one was the case number where I was adopted, and the third was that my grandfather was a publisher. So, with the help of a lawyer in Alexandria, pardon me, through very indirect means and bending of the rules and so on, all of which is described, I made it to the actual order of adoption, which revealed my name at birth, Karen Muse. And from there, with the help of the Pratt Library in Baltimore, a major library, I found a national directory of publishers, and there was only one Muse, Benjamin Muse. So I knew he had to be my grandfather. I headed down to Manassas, Virginia, where his newspaper was published, spent 2 hours absolutely accomplishing nothing with microfiche. The library was about to close, and the librarian said, "May I help you?" So I gave him the name, Benjamin Muse, and he said, "Oh, well, you know, of course, Benjamin Muse has just published his autobiography. It's on reserve in the back of the room." So here's what happened. "Well, thank you very much," I said. "I think I will take a quick look at that book." At 5 minutes before 9, with the library about to close, I pulled down the book, The 20th Century as I Saw It, by Benjamin Muse. Books on reserve can't be removed from the library, and I wasn't a member anyway. I knew there would be no time to read this book, so I quickly wrote down the publisher's information so I could order my own copy the next day. As I did, I noticed that this was a book that had a collection of photographs in its middle. Undoubtedly, these photographs would include pictures of my family. I sat for a few minutes to collect my thoughts and get mentally prepared. I was about to see photographs of my grandfather and maybe others in my biological family for the first time. After having come so far in this search for my history, it was a juncture of great significance. I braced myself for whatever these photographs might reveal and plunged ahead in the remaining minutes. Flipping the book open to its middle, I thumbed through a startling array of photographs. Okay, Claire? She has a couple of them I can share with you. Can you put it up? This is my grandfather standing in John Kennedy's Oval Office, along with Abe Fortas and Judge Gerhard Giselle and a number of great Americans who were being appointed to the Committee on Equal Opportunity in the Armed Forces. My grandfather's the third from the left. Next. This is greeting Charles and Anne Lindbergh as they get off the plane. Thank you, Claire. And there were many more photos. My grandfather meeting with world leaders and in important places as important events were occurring. So I went home and read the book. Turned out he'd been a diplomat for 15 years and had been a state senator in Virginia, ran for governor, wrote 6 books for Brookings, and had a column in the Washington Post. The other thing he mentioned in the book was that on a crossing to Montevideo, his 4-year-old child, Catherine, had an emergency and needed an operation. I knew from the date of birth in the original record that Catherine was my mother. So, of course, I didn't know her last name. 32 years had passed, and I called up Paul Muse, his son, at the newspaper and nonchalantly said, "This is Deborah Jennings. I'm a lawyer in Baltimore. I'm trying to reach your sister, Catherine," as if I knew her last name, which, of course, I did not. And incredibly, he said, "Oh, well, she's in Cuernavaca, Mexico, but I can have her call you." So he took the information. I was very buoyed. A day passes, nothing. Another day passes, nothing. The third day passes, nothing. So at this point, I thought for sure she knew who I was and she didn't want to make a connection. And by the way, that often happens in this kind of situation. So I go to bed on the third day, and this is what happened. Then, late at night on the third day, Phil and I were lying in bed when the phone rang. In the early stages of slumber, I had forgotten about the ongoing search that now seemed to consume my daily thought. The phone rang a second time, and I dragged myself to answer it. Pardon me. "Hello," a female voice said with a distinctly Virginia accent. "This is Katie Furcron. My brother Paul told me you were trying to reach me." Suddenly, wide awake, I realized this was a long distance call, the call from Cuernavaca, Mexico. I tried to make myself remember what I had planned to say. Once again, I carefully thought through and practiced what I was going to say. I was not going to say something stupid like, "I think I'm your daughter." After all, this was the woman who had made the decision to give me away. She might not want to acknowledge that I'm her daughter. I had memorized and practiced a different approach that would allow her to acknowledge the connection. The moment of truth had arrived. My heart stopped as I made myself say the rehearsed words. "Oh, thank you for calling. I'm a lawyer in Baltimore, and my name is Deborah Jennings. I called you because I have recently learned that I was adopted, and my name at birth was Karen Muse." I blurted this out in one breath, not really knowing what I would say next. An extended silence followed. "Oh my God," she whispered. Another silence. Then she said, slowly, poignantly, "It's my baby, my baby. I have been searching for you for 10 years. Yet another long silence followed as we both tried, without success, to manage our emotions. Shaken as powerful emotions overtook me, I could not speak. Tears ran down my face and chills up my spine. Catherine was actually talking to me and acknowledging that she was my birth mother. Finally, words slowly emerged from my lips. "You have been searching for me?" I said with disbelief. I was amazed and gratified to hear this. "Yes, but I had the wrong name. That was probably why I couldn't find you." So she told me I should go visit my grandparents. They were in Reston, Virginia, which was not far from Baltimore. And then I should come down to Mexico and meet her. So we went down that weekend to visit the grandparents. I knew everything about my grandfather from his book, but very little about my grandmother. As it turned out, she was a very elegant woman, spoke 3 languages, had been a diplomatic wife. She grew up in the Yucatan in a city called Merida, 1.5 million people, a real city in Mexico, in a very aristocratic family. There were a dozen Spanish families in Merida who built 60 haciendas rimming the city, and they raised sisal from a form of cactus, and it's used for rope and rugs. They exported it around the world and became wildly wealthy in the process. So she spent winters in Merida, summers on the Riviera or at their beach house. And she graduated from Cambridge University in the UK, top of her class, 2 subjects. So she was really quite extraordinary. And Claire, if you would. Now remember, I grew up on the back porch of a 1-bedroom apartment. So here's my grandmother's house, the white one. This is now a girls' school in Merida. And the next one. This is part of her hacienda, which is called YLK. So we went down to Mexico, and I got to know Katie very well. For 10 years, she was nice to me. We traveled back and forth. I went there, she came to my place. And by the way, this is very unusual in these adoption stories to actually develop a relationship. But at the point of 10 years in, she suffered a terrible accident. Her room filled with carbon monoxide, killed her husband, and left her unconscious on her right arm, resulting in the loss of her arm. She was a right-handed artist, so it was a devastating blow. But she bounced back with her left hand and became a better left-handed artist than she had ever been as a right-handed artist. So that was the happy part of the story. But it also changed her personality, and she lost her filter, lashed out at people one by one. She lost her friends. And over time, she became very depressed, got involved with unscrupulous real estate speculators, lawyers, lost everything. Lost 2 apartments in Acapulco, a house in Merida, and ownership of her own house. So in the final 5 years of her life, she lived essentially as a recluse, very sad and alone. But I stayed with her till the end. And when she died in 2014, I was the only American at her memorial service in Merida, Mexico. So a lot of people ask me, well, don't you think you missed out? You could have been part of this very educated, sophisticated, world-traveling family. Do you feel resentment about that? And the short answer is no. So at the end of the book, this is where I end up. The ultimate understanding this experience gave me was about the meaning of family. A lifetime earlier, I thought of myself as the only child of Jess and Eileen Jennings, a policeman and a bank clerk, living in the Maryland suburbs of Washington, D.C. I always loved and felt loved by both parents. I always felt safe. My parents were predictable and reliable. They loved each other, they worked hard, and they set a good example. For a child, these are the qualities of great parents. Among them, the critically important elements of family are unconditional love and support. Jess and Eileen provided the foundation for me to flourish as a lawyer and a wife with children of my own. Katie could not have provided any of this. She was consumed with her own problems and lashed out at the people around her. She decided at my birth that she had no room for a child, and she was right. Lucky for me, Jess and Eileen came along. They are and will always be my family. Thank you, Claire. And thank you, Atmosphere.
Incredible. What a fascinating story. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Deborah.
Sure.
Great. Our final reader for today is Eric Eichhorn. Eric is the author of several plays and feature pieces. He was born in Michigan and attended the University of Michigan. He now lives in New York with his dog, Keith. He has never been to a dinosaur festival. Darkly funny, unexpectedly tender, and packed with bad decisions and weirder friendships, OGALLALA is a story of second chances, sharp turns, and what happens when a man finally stops running from himself. We'll hear more now from Eric.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you very much for all the work you've done in putting this on. My only regret right now is that I have to go next. Thank you both to Andrea and Deborah. Those were fantastic stories. And Claire gave a little bit of background, and I'll just add that the story is told from the perspective of Bennett, who is a middle-aged, disconnected man, and Zoe, who is a 19-year-old MMA fighter. And the purpose of the trip from Ann Arbor, Michigan to Vernal, Utah is for Zoe's fight. This chapter is going to be from quite late in the novel. And it is the day now of Zoe's fight, and she is very uneasy about the prospect of facing Maritza Sanchez, who is one of the top fighters in the West. Zoe is kind of almost a new fighter, so really has no business in this fight. And Hector, her trainer, is making her quite anxious with his odd behavior. And compounding things, when she woke up this morning, Bennett's car was gone from the motel, and no one seemed to know where he had gone. Well, Hector does know where Bennett is. He's up in the mountains getting rid of a body. But Zoe started her day with a sunrise poolside conversation with Martha, a woman staying at the motel, and now it's time for lunch. Zoe pushed the spaghetti around on her plate. She sipped water and watched Hector build a plate of food at the buffet. After leaving Martha and returning to her room, she had slept, and Hector banged on her door at around 11. She showered, and they walked a block in the crushing heat to this family restaurant. Whatever he thought about her behavior at the pool last night, he had decided to reassert himself in her life process. She was anxious, making it easier for her to follow him. Hector asked her if Martha could give them a ride to the arena around 4. When she'd asked why Bennett couldn't drive them, he huffed and said Martha would be easier. He told her Bennett had gone hiking and might not return in time. Hector sounded odd, and it felt weird. Bennett hadn't said anything about hiking, and it bothered her that he might miss her fight. He had been very supportive and made her feel protected. She wasn't sure how much she wanted to be alone with Martha and her questions. Hector returned to the table and grunted as he placed the food down. The food looks like it's left over from the dinosaurs. Zoe put a roll in her mouth. She knew at some point they would have to talk about the fight. She hadn't watched any more of Maritza's fights and wasn't sure if Hector was still all in with her. He seemed agitated about something. I got a guy to rub you down at the arena. Zoe looked up. Why aren't you doing it? Hector shrugged. The best fighters use professionals. I'm not the best fighter, she said. You damn well won't be until you think you are. I never won a fight thinking I was going to lose. Zoe rolled her eyes. Hector had used that line before every fight. I didn't say I wanted to lose. Hector cut into his fried chicken, dipped it in gravy, and let it sit on his fork. He stared at the chicken and then at Zoe. You need to be careful with Maritza. She can hurt you. That's why you taught me to defend myself, right? Hector put the chicken in his mouth. He paused and then chewed, checking his phone on the table. A guy told me he thinks she's the best girl fighter he's seen. You mean woman fighter. Call her whatever you want. She's like a lioness. Zoe twirled some spaghetti on her fork. It was gray and she wasn't rushing to put it in her mouth. She could see the cook in the back. His dirty apron and sweaty face weren't making her hungry. Hector raised his hand for the waitress. Can I get coffee? The waitress nodded and turned to go back into the kitchen. Why am I fighting a lioness? Asked Zoe. I just thought it was a great opportunity. Trust me. Zoe stared at Hector, who turned away to monitor the waitress. He never fully responded to her questions, which needed answers. I would trust you more if I had a chance to win, she said. The waitress came over with his coffee. Hector put his spoon in and tapped the sides of the cup. What's with the attitude, he asked. Ever since we started this trip, you've been off. Maritza is fighting me, and it's not an opportunity for her. Why don't I fight someone I can beat? Hector put his spoon on the table and wrapped his hands around the mug. He appeared tired. I don't know. I always fought people who were better than me. If you beat someone you're supposed to, nobody cares. It's winning when you're not supposed to that matters. Through the restaurant window, Zoe could see the festival crowd beginning to grow. Men wearing cowboy hats, women spilling out of crop tops, and little kids mimicking a variety of dinosaurs. She spotted a normally dressed man who looked a little like Bennett, but was heavier. She wished they were done and heading home, but she knew nothing exciting was waiting in Michigan. She studied Hector in his sweatshirt and knit cap. His hands were swollen, and not all his fingers were straight. He had a slight hunch, and his entire body shifted when he turned his head. His appearance said he had been fighting losing fights. She stuffed the spaghetti in her mouth, chewed, and swallowed. I'm getting a Pepsi, she said. She waited for a dramatic reaction, but Hector looked at her with ambivalence. He started to speak and then shrugged. He checked his phone again and then put it in his pocket. Go ahead. Zoe motioned for the waitress, who acknowledged her, but remained leaning against the wall. I want a large Pepsi. The waitress walked to the soda machine and filled a Pepsi without speaking. She placed it in front of Zoe. Is there a problem with the food, she asked? The insinuation flustered Zoe. No, I'm sorry, I'm just a slow eater. It's great. Hector grunted and barked. It's awful. Zoe and the waitress turned to Hector to confirm that he had spoken and said those words. The waitress tensed. Folks say we're the best restaurant in town. Fried chickens won awards. Customers at the nearby tables stopped to listen. Zoe squirmed and waited for Hector to respond. He smiled at the waitress. I may have misspoken. I'll keep eating until it tastes better. The waitress hesitated, considered his words, shrugged, and walked away. Zoe rapped her knuckles on the table. You didn't have to be mean. Hector shook his head. People need to know when they fail. Otherwise, they can't improve. Zoe dangled her spaghetti. She put her fork down and took a drink of Pepsi. She needed Bennett to return for her fight. Hector was making her uncomfortable. When do you think Bennett will be coming back? She asked. Hector paused his chicken cutting and looked at his plate. Did he say where he was going? He didn't. Hector motioned his knife at her. You need carbs. Eat. I can't. Hector put his knife and fork down and leaned back in his chair. Zoe looked at her food but felt his stare. His words were softer than she expected. There's nothing to be afraid of, Zoe. That's it.
Wonderful, Eric. Some really great lines in there and, unique characters. I'm intrigued to read more. Um, Thank you so much for sharing, everyone. This has been a really fantastic reading. Um, we have 10 or so minutes for our audience Q&A. So if you do have a question, please go ahead and type it in the chat and I'll make sure it gets asked. We do have already some questions for Deborah. Um, so we have from Julian Levy. Debbie, I think your book is wonderful. Perry Mason with humor, tenderness, and empathy. My question is, how much easier or more difficult would it be to conduct your search in today's world with internet and other means of communication and record view?
Well, thank you, Julian. And Julian's a friend of mine. So nice to have you here. I don't think it would be a lot easier, to tell you the truth. These records are still sealed in most places. In Maryland, it's been loosened somewhat, but only for people born after the year 2000. So the primary mission seems to be still to protect the identity of the birth mother. It could happen coincidentally that you and whoever your relative is both take, 23andMe or Ancestry, and you're alerted to a connection, but that never would have happened in this circumstance because Katie was in Mexico. So she was not doing that, and I think there would have been virtually no chance. I might have discovered a cousin, perhaps. As it turned out, though, by the way, I'm the 24th cousin in my family, biological, and they've all welcomed me, made me very much a part of the family.
That's amazing. Um, Michael Kelly asks, did your two weddings remain a secret with both sides of the family?
Now, see, I can tell he's read the book because I didn't talk about that. But my birth mother, having become a mother, when I was 32, I was engaged. So the first thing she thought about, of course, was planning a wedding. And unfortunately, my other mother had already planned a wedding, so we ended up having two weddings. And the second wedding, which was in Mexico at her house, was perfectly ridiculous because she invited 80 people we didn't know. 75 of them spoke no English whatsoever. But the good news about that was that some of the Yucatecan relatives came and invited us to the Yucatan.
Wow, amazing. Um, your next question from Muriel Beck Kadima. Eric, why did you call your book Ogallala?
When I was a young boy, I visited Ogallala and I never forgot it. It's a small Western. If you ever read Lonesome Dove,
Mhm.
they drove the cattle up through Ogallala. So it's a fascinating Western town. And when I started this story, it was just going to be about a man going to Ann Arbor to visit his ex-girlfriend from college. And it became a road trip. So I took my finger and just kind of followed Highway 80. And I looked over and Ogallala was there. And so Ogallala became the place of something that happened in the book, which was really the key moment. The turning point of the book is really in Ogallala. And then I kept my finger going and I saw dinosaur national monuments, which are in northeastern Utah. And I saw the town of Vernal and I Googled, and it's all about dinosaurs. This little town exists for no reason but dinosaurs. So it's really just putting my hand on a map.
Awesome. And I also have a question for Andrea. I was wondering what was the first idea or moment that really set this book in motion for you?
Gotta unmute. I guess it was that this boy had actually gone missing in this town that I lived in, and we'd only lived there for 1 year, and I had my Canadian accent, and my husband is from Switzerland, so he has also an accent, and we I think we felt a little bit as the outsiders, as a little bit like these characters do in this story. And so when this actual crisis occurred, it sort of intensified those feelings, I guess. And that was a feeling that sort of stayed with me for a while and in more of my travels as well. So I think that's how it began. Yeah.
And then I have a question for everyone. What's next for you as writers?
Mm.
Well, I was going to let the others go first, but since nobody's, um, I I have probably going to write another play next. Um, there's a topic that I've delayed um, working on, and I think I'm probably ready to do that now. So I would guess that I'm going to write another play.
I've given some thought to writing a prequel. I didn't read any of this, but my book begins with the story of my parents, who have a very lovely story of their own. My mother was from New Zealand. My father was a Marine at Guadalcanal. He got malaria and he was sent to New Zealand. And he told everybody he was delirious and she nabbed him. But they were married in New Zealand, and she made the very courageous decision to follow him back to the US, essentially giving up her connection with her own family. So it's a beautiful story of their own. And it was an interesting time too. There were something like 100,000 American GIs who went to New Zealand. So that whole series of events is very interesting, and I may write the prequel about them.
Yeah, like you said, Claire, I've been working on a memoir, mainly for my daughters, but that's almost finished, and I'm starting to research. I have my next idea, which is going to be based in the Netherlands, and I need to do a little bit of research on one of the characters that is formulating in my mind, I guess. And I'm also doing some writing for a podcast right now that a friend of mine began called Almost Local, which is about being living abroad and just having a space for people to share in that space. So it's keeping me busy.
That's great. I love how active you guys are, it's like one thing's out, but there's always something churning. Um, and our last question from Alec Hood for all authors. When it comes to writing mystery, how do you maintain the balance between keeping the audience engaged throughout while simultaneously keeping the cards close to your chest? Did you ever feel pressure to reveal too much too soon? How do you decide how much breadcrumbs to leave behind for the reader as they make their way through the story?
I guess I'm going to go first again. I I usually don't figure that out until the second or third draft, um, because you write it. I don't outline. I just kind of go and feel through the story. So that generally means that some of my pieces don't fit. And it's oftentimes going through the second time, the third time with people you can't write alone, with other people saying, that doesn't make sense. What happened to the gun or whatever. So unfortunately, I find the balance through rewrites.
Mm. I think in my case, while it's not a mystery, there are 3 chapters devoted to the search. And this was easy because it was a mystery to me. So essentially, what I did was tell the story as I discovered it. And in each case, I'm learning some new essential fact. And then ultimately, it becomes clear. So it was easy.
Mine, yeah. I think for mine uh it was easy in the sense that I already knew the whole story because I knew what I was basing it on. And so it was more than drawing that out. And that was like with false accusations and making the reader go in different directions a little bit, having some red herrings in there. And yeah, I think for me that became, I had to make sure that it wasn't too much. I didn't want the reader to be confused or um, draw it out for too long. So I don't know, but I hope I found the right balance with that.
Well, it was so great to hear all of your books and the voices of their creators. Thank you so much to Andrea, Deborah, and Eric for your generosity with your time, words, and thoughts today. And thank you everyone for being here with us to celebrate these wonderful authors. Don't forget to order Below the Surface, Ghost Child, and Ogallala from the links in the chat. Please also consider checking out atmospherepress.com to browse our new and forthcoming releases, sign up for our email newsletter, or submit a book manuscript of your own. Submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com and let us know that you attended today's event. We look forward to hearing from you. And that's it. Have a great rest of your week, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Claire.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Claire. Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye.